Well, MPP Amanda Simard, thank you very much for joining us today to have a little bit of a catch up for what's occurring in our region at the moment. The last time we spoke, it was just building up to the first sitting of 2021 for the Provincial Legislative Assembly. So I think the perfect place to start is to ask you how it's sort of going, because you had the February session and the March session has started now. So how's things going on the floor?
Things are going good. We're continuing voting in the lobbies. So if you, I think I mentioned it a bit last time, we changed the procedure so that we don't all have to be in the parliament together voting, standing up at the same time. We don't have the option of virtual like the federal parliament has. The Conservatives denied that motion. So we're still sitting in person. We're there, but we've adapted, changed the protocols, and it's going well. It's just that sometimes you want to be in the chamber, you want to be in the debate, because that's our privilege, right? You can stand up anytime, but and represent your constituents and just be recognized by the speaker and speak. But now they're telling us we have to only have a certain limited number of people in the chamber. So that's a little bit, I find bizarre, but it's unprecedented times. So that's how it is. And as for business, there's legislative business. We are debating quite a few things right now. I think the vaccine administration were asking why the government is taking so long to have a portal in place because people want to get their vaccine. I know you'll remember in November or December, the Premier made the statement, actually it was earlier than that. Premier Ford said, we need the vaccines. It's all the federal government's fault. We don't have the vaccines, but when we have the vaccines, we'll be ready. Now we have a lot of vaccines and they're not ready because we can't get them signed up on a portal. That'll start March 15. So we're 2 weeks behind Quebec and BC. So it's quite the challenge, but we've established a timeline for people that can get vaccinated with the age group. So I think that'll go well. I think it was the right call to have the public units decide on the way that they want to manage the administration of the vaccines because we're all different. Our area is very different than downtown Toronto. And so it's important that our local medical officer has the authority and the discretion to administer the vaccine or administer all of that rollout on his own with his team. So I think vaccines are occupying a lot of our discussions, access to those vaccines and who's a priority, who's an essential worker, and what about the teachers? What about the education staff? So that's all things that we need to focus on right now. But it's been good. It's good to be back because now we can ask the questions to the Premier and the government. It's good. It was too long. I think it was too long of a delay or a break during the holidays because there's so much to do. We have a lot of work and I'm glad to be back.
And well, you touched on the vaccine point there. One of the other things that's coming up at the moment is one of the latest news from the press conference by the EOHU the other day was this great, fantastic news about the approval of the AstraZeneca vaccine. The fact that it seems like the latest studies say the efficacy has gone up, though obviously that depends a little bit, Dr. Paul was explaining, on the delay, the time you take between the two doses. But there is obviously this question that looms over people's heads, which is, with these variety of vaccines available now and some of them seeming to be better than others, how is the provincial government going to be factoring in and handling people's preferences and people's fears over the fact that they may be getting an inadequate one?
That is an excellent question that I asked personally. I had a meeting with Dr. Vera Etches, who's the Chief Medical Officer in Ottawa. She's the Ottawa Medical Officer. And as you know, a part of our riding here in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell is part of Ottawa. And I asked the same question about the vaccine differences. And first I'll say, the best vaccine that you can have is the one that you have access to, right? But we're in a position where we have 3 now, soon more. And I said, what about people that want to choose which vaccine that they will get? Because to me, if we can get even a portion of people that would otherwise not get the vaccine because they're hesitating, we need to be able to give that option to people because it's for the good of everybody. And the response was that when we're booking the vaccine, we'll be able to see at the locations which vaccine that they have in stock and which one that they're administering. I don't think they'll have the 3 at one location. Usually they send one batch or a few batches of the same to different locations. So you should be able to see which one is there. But for the people that are 80 and older and the senior population, we're just getting the vaccines out as soon as possible, and there is no choice, right? Because we just need to get them out as soon as possible. So the supply that we have, it needs to get into people's arms. So for that, there is no choice. But from what I understood, when you do go, when it gets to your turn, if you're not a senior, then you should see which one you're administered. And that's a really important question, because to me, I understand that there are concerns, and this is our body, right? And there could be some hesitancy, or there's some hesitation, and if it's that will get people to take the vaccine when they otherwise wouldn't, then we need to give them the option.
Yeah, great to hear that when these mass clinics open up to potentially people further down phase 2 and phase 3 of the vaccine rollout, that you'll be able to see, as you were stating just then, that the clinic you're signing up for, which vaccines being administered. Just to clarify, you were saying there about the 80-year-olds plus getting vaccines into arms. I take it you mean Pfizer and Moderna at that point, because NACI has still said for now that AstraZeneca will not go into arms of 65 plus. Have you heard anything on a provincial level about the recent approval of Johnson & Johnson and Janssen, and maybe when that one, because that's a one dose, doesn't need to be frozen, just approved in America. Do we have any idea on a timeline for that?
I personally don't, and I had a meeting with Dr. Paul yesterday, and that's always the topic of discussion, especially for us. Johnson & Johnson will be very important for us because, as you said, it's a one dose. And for our rural area with the senior residents, it cannot be a type of vaccine that we have to have frozen all the time, and that is very particular. We need to be able to move it. So we're really looking forward to that, and it'll help with the administration of the vaccines if there's only one dose. But it's very positive. I was at the dentist the other day, and they had just gotten their shots. And the excitement, the people that have received their shots, they just so excited, and it gives me hope. And I hadn't seen that much happiness in a long time, and it really warmed my heart because I could see the end. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. So that was really a nice moment. But the vaccines, we still have to respect all of the measures until everyone gets their second dose. But it's really promising, and we already have 3. And with the 4th one coming, I don't know the exact timeline. And I wanted to say about the efficacy, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but for the AstraZeneca, it was 62%, but I'm not sure with the trials. I think we need to double check that, if that included the senior population, because they're saying that it might not be as effective on seniors, but if you include that in the trial, of course, it's going to bring down the efficacy, So I think there's a lot of nuances, and that we shouldn't be worried. A vaccine is better than nothing at all. And we need to trust, it's pretty advanced technologies and medical science there that we've done in the past year. We've never ever seen this before, things being developed at this rate. So I think that it's a good thing we're living in this world right now, given the circumstances. So I think that it's good news. It's good news.
Yeah, absolutely. When we take it into this wider perspective, as you say, we're barely 12 months into an unforeseen, virtually unprecedented in pretty much all of our lifetimes pandemic. and yet 12 months down the line, we are in the midst of a vaccine rollout. When we're talking about some of the caution that obviously still remains with people, we're seeing global cases starting to rise again. The WHO came out and warned people about easing safety and health measures at the moment, and the risks that could pose as we get complacent with these vaccines rolling out. What's the provincial government's take on this? Are you looking to maybe ease restrictions at the moment? Are we still, Dr. Paul mentioned that the specifics for each yellow, orange and red zone might alter a little bit as we face these new variants as well at the moment. So is the provincial government taking a safety first option, or are these restrictions likely to loosen in the month of March?
Well, I know we absolutely need to be very careful about easing the restrictions. It's about where and how and who's affected. So we're in the orange zone. So relatively we're in a good place. But I don't think that we should be penalizing those small businesses that are respecting the measures, incredibly careful. There's contact tracing. When you get in the store, you give your information, the physical distancing, everything's sanitized, and then they're forced to shut down. That is very strict when they're not the problem. We have proven that it's not the small businesses that are contributing to the outbreaks. It's the the factories, the workplaces, and the social gatherings. And now we're shutting down all these small businesses that have 3 clients at a time in their businesses, when Costco and Walmart and all these big box stores are staying open, not contact tracing, not physical distancing. So whatever we do, it absolutely needs to be balanced and driven by data. So I think it's a good thing to have the regions, but the government needs to really look at when they do shut down, when we go in lockdown, if we change zones, whatever the criteria is, it needs to be based on data and not punish those businesses who are not contributing to the problem. So I think that was very unfortunate. That's not changing. Those zones with maybe the threshold and the numbers will change, but they're still shutting down the restaurants and the small businesses when they're not the problem. So I think that if we were to have higher cases and with the variants, we need to be looking at the big stores, the workplaces, to make sure that they're safe, and the other places where the outbreaks are, not the small businesses that are, quite frankly, the ones that are most respecting the measures.
Well, as you say there, the small businesses and restaurants, we can sort of tell by the data that's been released so far that they are not always the source of these huge outbreaks. As you say, other stores, other factories and social gatherings. But we know there's obviously a correlation between the increased number of outbreaks and social gatherings with easing of measures as people get a little bit more relaxed about things. So would you, based on what you're saying there, be looking to push the idea that even if we are in a stricter place, to try and discourage social gatherings, for example, we might ease things on smaller businesses and not shut them down immediately?
Yes, we need to be taking a more adapted approach. So we are a rural area with pockets of towns where the businesses are. So we're in a position where we're able to identify what types of businesses, what types of workplace are able to function normally without those very strict measures. There's different sizes of the businesses, but the small businesses, I think we need to take a closer look and see why we're shutting them down when we go into a red zone or a gray zone or stricter, because they're the local economy. They're providing jobs, and they're part of our community, and they're not the problem. So why are we shutting them down in a one blank, like in a one it's just one approach, right? It's just the same for everybody, but it's not like that. So I think that we have a good medical officer, and I trust Dr. Paul. He is just really making sure that we're taken into account at the provincial table, at the command table, and the groups that make the decisions, that our area, it's very specific. It's rural in parts, but also pockets with communities, and we need a different approach. So I'm happy to have him advocating at that place to have us decide our own measures and our own system that we want.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of small business owners out there in the region will be very happy to hear you saying this and be very eager for you to hear you supporting this as well. You mentioned just then about people working and it's sort of COVID related. The last time that we spoke pre the legislative assembly's first sitting in February, you were talking about that push for those extra sick days. Was this under the Stay at Home If You're Sick Act? Was that part of it? These extra sick days you were looking for? How is that going?
No, the government voted it down. When did we vote on it? I think it was yesterday. Yesterday, yes. So it was one of the members of the opposition presented the bill to have those sick days, and the government, the Conservatives, voted it down. So our party, the Liberal caucus, will bring another piece of legislation to try it again with a few little tweaks. And so we'll continue trying until we can get the government to understand that how can you stop the outbreaks in the workplaces if people don't have sick days? They cannot afford to lose a day, a few hours of work. If they don't feel well and they need to put food on the table, they're still going to go to work. And so it's important for us to recognize, and let's be very clear, these would not be business paid sick days. This is government paid sick days. So it's not a strain on our small businesses. So I made sure of that, because there's no point of hurting the business at a time when they're struggling already. So what we're proposing is government paid sick days for that. So we'll try again, but it was defeated this week.
What was the reason for the defeat? What was the reason for the Conservative government, as you're saying, voting against it? Did they give an explanation as to what they didn't like about the bill?
Yeah, so Premier Ford and the Conservative government said that the federal government were already providing that, but we know that it's not enough, and it's our responsibility. Labor, it's provincial, and so it's a pattern. Though I think we know now that the Premier and the PC government right now are just relying on the federal government to give all the resources and all the financing and all the programs available. It was proven by the reports, the independent third-party reports said that 97% of the resources available to the help that has been available to Ontarians was federal. 3% of that was provincial. And so I think that our government needs to step up and this would be a perfect opportunity. This is our jurisdiction. And it's much needed, and it would be very helpful. We saw the outbreaks, I'm sure you saw, Thomas, at the St. Albert cheese factory, there was an outbreak of the variant. And so it's very important. We know the workplaces, people can't stop working. They need the money and they need the funds. It's normal. And so we need to support them. If they are sick, we don't want them to come to work. Because we'll never get out of this if we keep people going to work while they're sick.
So we had the opportunity to speak to the general director of the cheese factory in St. Albert, and their COVID response seemed to be absolutely fantastic. They were very quick to deal with all of it. But as you say, if staff members need to take that time off, then food needs to still be put on the table. So obviously, I think everyone in the region will be very eager to hear this bill go back to the floor and very excited about that. On other local news, I think E.ON just came out with a press release stating they put forward a proposal to the federal and provincial government about providing the internet in rural areas. Obviously, this touched on very much the Broadband on Essential Service Act. Can you tell us a little bit how that's been debated in Parliament at the moment and what do you make of this E.ON proposal?
Yes, I was actually on the meetings for that proposal with other elected officials to hear about the projects. And it's so important to have the good internet access in our area, especially with the online learning. That has been the biggest challenge in the last few months for me. I've been receiving calls from parents, angry parents, and I share their frustration because they're forced to have their kids learning at home online, but they don't have proper internet access, so they're falling behind. The kids are falling behind simply because of where they are, where they live in Ontario. And this, we're not talking about a third world country here. We're talking about Ontario, close to Ottawa. And so we absolutely need to have the infrastructure in place and to have that access. But you know, the different levels of government have been talking about this for years and years, and they're recycling announcements. And this is not a partisan issue. It's not about it was a conservative government and it's a liberal government or whatever. It's not that. It's just they keep talking and there's nothing happening. And so it's really important that everybody comes together, the three levels of government, and build that. I mean, have we been talking about this for 7-8 years? Probably more. And we're still at a point where we can't get proper internet in 2021. And you would think with the COVID, while we're forced to do the learning and the working from home, that it would speed things up, but it doesn't look like it has.
Yeah, I know the government's target was 95% of Ontario to have access to high-speed internet by 2026 and 100% by 2030. Do you think these targets are going to have to be moved back? As you say, there's a lot of talking and not a lot of action at the moment.
Yeah, they should be moved, sooner. They should be sooner, because with the technology we have today, I know we have to be realistic, but look at what we did with the vaccine. I know it's on another scale, it's a global scale, but it's really pressing. And so what if we're in another year like this? We don't know. What if something happens, in the short term too? Like, we need to really get moving on this. It's very important. It's internet. I think a few years ago, it was starting to become something that we consider as a basic need now because of how much we rely on it. And if we don't have proper, then we're second-class citizens, right? We don't have the same access as everybody else. And it's also important for local development. Who is going to want to come live in an area and develop in an area where we don't have proper internet? So it's all connected, but for sure, if we work with the federal government and the proposal would be, the proposal is great. So I'm happy about that. It's just, we need the governments to step up and provide the financing that it needs.
Fantastic. Moving on to just one last thing I wanted to pick your brains about, MPP Simard, before we head off today. In the last couple of weeks and months, the municipality of Clarence-Rockland has been pushing forward something that was actually first brought to the attention by the Councillor Fleury in Ottawa about some further restrictions on cannabis stores. I mean, as you probably know, in our municipality, I think we have 3 with their doors open now, with a 4th one on the way, which seems to be quite a lot. I know one of the acts at the moment going through the Provincial Parliament is the Cannabis Licence Amendment Act, which looks to maybe give a little bit more power to municipalities to be able to handle it. Being a very new sector, maybe it does need a little bit more control. Do we know what's happening there and what kind of powers this act would look to try and give municipalities?
I would have to look into that, but I was a municipal councillor in Russell Township before being elected provincially, and I remember that was the time when those cannabis shops started being popular and popped up in our area. And we did want control on, different issues, because we have to be able to manage the locations and to try to, it's not control, but it's still a part of our community that we have to be careful of not having that everywhere. And certain corners and certain places, there's buffers. I remember provincially, when we were doing the legislation, we did buffers with school zones, but I acknowledge that because I was part of the discussions, but we didn't put the buffers, far enough. And maybe there's some tweaks to be done, and there's opportunities for that in the legislation to make amendments on the things that maybe we didn't get right the first time, because it's new. It's a new, it was just legalized, and it's the provincial responsibility to manage it, but we've never done this before. So I think that we need to listen to municipalities on what they believe they would need control on. And I think we're reasonable. I think the municipalities would be reasonable in terms of what they would like to control and have a say on. So, but it's so new, Thomas, that it's normal that in the last few years we're just adapting. But definitely, I can understand the municipality, because I was a former councillor. I was a councillor at the time when they were just starting to pop up.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago in a council meeting, Councillor Mario Zant here locally mentioned about he thought there was a pot of money that was going to be provided provincially to try and help with prevention methods and education methods surrounding, because as you say, brand new market, we don't quite know what the dangers could be, especially in younger people. And he was hoping and thinking there was supposed to be some money allocated to municipalities to help with an education campaign. This is in campagne de sensibilisation, I think was the phrase that he used. So is this something that that he has spoken to you about? Has he reached out to you about this? And is this something that you could maybe bring forward and have a little look at?
He hasn't reached out to me yet, but if he does, and even if he doesn't, I will look into it, because I'm sure there should be funds available for that, because that was the most important thing. You know, we were reluctant as a province when it was all legalized. We're like, how are we going to do this and not normalize it and tell people that to go and do it, right? To that all of a sudden it's all good. So there needs to be, especially for young kids, some sensibilisation, awareness, and education. That's the most important thing. So if the province hasn't provided funds for that, I would be very surprised. But he's right that that should definitely be part of a municipal strategy at the local level.
Well, Ms. Simard, thank you so much for today. Before I let you run away, we're towards the end of the week of debates within the Legislative Assembly here in Ontario. Can you tell us what else is coming up? Is there anything in particular you're keeping an eye on?
The budget. We expect the provincial budget to be, tabled shortly. So we'll be debating the budget, usually end of March. So we need to be ready for that and to see what we could propose in there, or what affects us in our communities and our priorities. So I'm looking forward to that. So we'll be able to chat about that as we get information. So that'll be fun.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for giving us some of your time today. And I look forward to chatting with you again next month, back in French that time. And we might even have some budget stuff to chat about.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Speak to you soon.
Thanks.